Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It's Wednesday, August the 8th, 2018, 21 minutes after 7 o'clock. Got freed up a few minutes early, so rather than sit around and wait for 7:30, I decided to go ahead and start right off the bat here at 7:20. We've got a lot going on tonight, so we're going to be talking about Hurricane Hector, Tropical Storm Debbie in the North Atlantic. The only reason is that it's the only one out there, and it really isn't too much going on in the tropical Atlantic, as we all know. But I do want to at least let you look at a website that I found from NOAA, and this would prove quite not only quite useful, but you could have some fun with it if you are a weather enthusiast. And it's another example of just how superior the coverage that the National Weather Service here in the U.S. Gives to weather and all the tools that you have at your disposal, as opposed to some of the other weather services around the world who have very little as far as tools for the average person to look at. So we'll take a look at that. We are also going to talk about the weather out in the west, which has, of course, been very problematic, particularly in the southwest in California, with the wildfires that are raging, and it doesn't appear as if there's any rain in your future at all. We're going to look at that, the long range here in the eastern part of the United States, and we'll look, of course, at what's going on currently tonight on the radars. Also, big hat tip and thank you to tropicaltidbits.com for generously letting us use your maps and website on this live stream. You'll always get a promotion and a mention from me for sure when it comes to your website. Thank you, Levi Cowan. Okay, let's start off front and center with Hurricane Hector, because Hector is now almost due south of the big island of Hawaii and moving on a course pretty much straight west. The eye of the hurricane is still pretty well defined, although the signature on the satellite is a little less impressive than it was yesterday and the day before, but top winds are at 115 miles an hour, so it's still a major Category 3 hurricane. Note the southern tip of Hawaii touches 19 degrees north, and the eye of the hurricane is down around 16 and a half, or a little bit north of 16 and a half. So it's a good 150 nautical miles south of the southern tip of the islands. Except for some high clouds, that really is about it. There's not much going on the big island of Hawaii. The core of the hurricane is well south. We've been emphasizing the fact that this is really kind of it's a very small system. If you look at the southern end of the brighter white cloud tops down at 15 and a half north, and the northern fringe is just barely at about 18. So you're talking about a storm where something might be going on in a zone of about 150 miles. So the impact to Hawaii will continue to be mainly to the coastal waters. The islands, the other islands are north of 20 degrees north, so the distance that this will pass south of Honolulu is by almost over 250 miles. So outside of just some patchy high clouds, that's all those islands are going to see. So fortunately, this is not going to turn into any kind of direct hit with regards to Hawaii, and you can see on the Hurricane Center's forecast map here how far south the hurricane is going to be as it moves westward. Now, all of the models cross it over the international date line and then continue it westward. In fact, the European would take it so far west that it actually starts to recurve east and offshore of Japan on its latest run, and the GFS is not too different from that. So this hurricane is indeed very rare to see them start off from the eastern Pacific and move all the way across the Pacific Ocean, and also The fact that it has maintained hurricane status is odd. We've had systems that have weakened into open waves, and then eventually, when they go west of the international date line, they fire up again. So it's a little odd to see something on the order of a full-fledged hurricane making it all the way across. But conditions must be they're pretty good to support this, and also the fact that water temperatures out in the Pacific are a little bit above average. Remember, we're on an El Nino watch, so if that warming continues, maybe there'll be a full-blown El Nino going into the fall and winter. We shall see. But that's a discussion for another day. But as far as Hawaii is concerned, again, I think the impacts are going to be minimal. The land impacts, coastal water impacts, a different story. Certainly there are going to be some very rough sea conditions over the next several days as the hurricane moves out to the west. Now, here's the website I was mentioning before. This is, if you go to nesdis, nesdis.noaa.gov, and you can find this link, by the way, on the National Hurricane Center's website. You can use this interactive tool that lets you pretty much zoom in on anywhere out in the Atlantic, and of course into the Northern Hemisphere as well. You can move the map along. We have Tropical Storm Debbie, and our resident statistician points out that this is the third system this year. Three of the four systems were subtropical at some point in their life cycles. We had Alberto in May. We had Beryl, which, when it regenerated in the Atlantic, regenerated as a subtropical storm. And now we have Debbie, that was a subtropical storm yesterday and actually became a tropical storm today as it acquired full-fledged tropical characteristics and is now moving away in the open waters of the North Atlantic. Not going to be a factor to anyone here, and that's it. By this time tomorrow, it's likely to be gone. I want to just show you, too, we could go down into the tropical Atlantic and out to the African coast. So here's the whole tropical Atlantic view. I really like this. I just found this this evening, so the next thing for me to do is to find one that loops, but that might be a little more difficult. But if you look at the tropical Atlantic, now we're going, it's a visible, so we're going to nighttime, of course, so that dark line is dark on one half and light on the other. That is the sun setting. So that's where the sunset was when this image was taken. And I'm trying to see where on here is somewhere there's probably the time. I can't seem to find it. But we do have a very anemic looking intertropical convergence zone down in the tropical Atlantic. You can see the clouds that are north of South America and east of the Windward Islands. Some low clouds as you go westward. The only thing that that is of any kind of interest is what looks to be a tropical wave now moving off the African coast. But the problem is we continue to see conditions that are just not favorable for tropical cyclone formation out in the tropical Atlantic. Here's a wider view. And what I'm liking about this, too, is that at least we can kind of see what's going on in the North Atlantic. You'll notice the edge of the satellite picture on the GOES is just about to England. And we can see Spain and Portugal and western France and just about all of England and Scotland except the extreme east coast. And we get a good view of Ireland as well. But we'd have to switch to the European satellite in order to see what's going on over further inland. Meanwhile, across the United States, you can look at the clouds that are in the east, and of course we do have some thunderstorms that are firing up tonight. We also can see out in the west. Now, I'm not sure how much of this, is low cloudiness. I have to kind of bone up a bit on what exactly I'm looking at. Definitely what's offshore, you can see the low clouds off the California coast. I'm trying to see if we could actually see some of the smoke from the wildfires here in California. I'm not sure if this is it. I'm thinking it probably isn't, but I'm going to have somebody take a look at this for me and figure this all out. But you can have a lot of fun with this if you're a weather enthusiast and you want to look at stuff. It's at nesdis.noaa.gov. And remember that you can access this from the National Hurricane Center's website, nhc.noaa.gov. Incidentally, I do have, there is a post on my website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, on Hector and on Debbie, and it goes into it a bit more. If you are interested, you can take a look at that. Now, as far as the weather goes tonight across the U.S. and on the radar tonight, last night we had some rather interesting conditions, to say the least, and they took the boilerplate off of Long Island and allowed thunderstorms to occur, and they were vicious. The lightning shows, as was described by many folks, was on the order of what they've hasn't been seen in a long, long time, or perhaps one of the greatest lightning displays that a lot of folks said that lightning displays were just incredible out over Long Island last night. And of course, there was severe weather across northern New Jersey, the Hudson Valley. This was part of the leading edge of this cold front that is now approaching this evening. The parameters today and yesterday actually were fairly similar, and yet a lot of times when you're dealing with severe weather, you could have what look to be the same conditions going from day to day, and then one day you'll get a huge amount of thunderstorm activity, and you might get it in one particular area, and then on another day you'll see them someplace else. So they are similar, but they're not exact, and that leads to changes. We do have broken lines of heavy thunderstorms tonight moving across New England through parts of upstate New York, back through western and central Pennsylvania. We've had a few renegade cells over parts of New Jersey and in the Hudson Valley and in southern Connecticut this evening. And then we also have some thunderstorm activity going on across West Virginia and parts of western Virginia. It's a little more organized. Whoops, sorry, that wasn't supposed to happen. It's a bit more organized in terms of the showers and storms. When you go to western North Carolina, northwestern South Carolina, northern Georgia, there's a broken line of very strong thunderstorms that runs back into Alabama. Also, we've got storms in South Georgia, also in parts of South Florida, particularly on the west coast. It seems very active today in the southwestern corner of the state. Some scattered cells in parts of Louisiana. A little more organization as we look through Arkansas. Then on up into the Great Lakes, a little activity there going into western Lake Superior. Also, by the way, a quick reminder, it is 7:34 Eastern Time. If you're looking at this on a replay, be sure to check your local National Weather Service office for any watches and warnings later on tonight. Obviously, this radar is dated, and you want to access that by going to weather.gov. Some monsoonal action in the southwest, sadly in California, where these wildfires are raging. Other than a couple of scattered cells that have popped up in parts of Southern California inland, there really isn't much at all. And in fact, when we look at the GFS, this is the rainfall forecast on the GFS, by the way, for the next 2 weeks. And you'll notice it's bone dry through much of California. There are some patches in Southern California, and then as you go east to the Nevada line, where you've got these kind of little blotches of a couple of tenths to maybe an inch. But remember, that's all spread out over 16 days. And the vast majority of the state, not a drop of rain is forecast for the next 16 days. You do get some monsoonal action going on in Arizona and New Mexico. It's still pretty wet up through the central Rockies, the southern plains, and even into parts of the central plains. We're looking at some fairly wet activity. And just for equal time, we'll go to the east. And again, this is over the next 2 weeks. Several inches of rain forecast across much of the eastern part of the United States, with some pockets of 4, 5, and 6 inches. So the pattern looks overall to be at least wet enough to produce downpours and thunderstorms from time to time, depending on what's going on in the upper atmosphere. And with regards to the upper atmosphere, we're going to see the next trough in the east. And right now, at least with regards to the northeast and the mid-Atlantic states, it's been so brutally humid, and the relief coming with this weak trough that's swinging through southeastern Canada on early Thursday is only barely going to lower the humidity. The more important factor is this trough that gets carved out into the Ohio Valley by Sunday. And this creates a bit of a southwest flow around it into the mid-Atlantic and northeast. And that upper low is going to sit to our west right into Wednesday. One of the things that the model seems to be slowing this down a little bit. So that could perhaps prolong the threat for showers. Thursday and Friday, the next 2 days look okay to me with the humidity levels dropping and shower and thunderstorm activity at a minimum, but we're going to start to see that pick up on Saturday. I don't think we're talking about washouts here, but there will be threats for downpours and even some thunderstorms beginning on Saturday and lasting into probably the first half of next week until this trough gets out of the way. And then another trough drops into the east. Now this one, suddenly the models have backed off on the strength of this. That could be right, it could be wrong. I'm not 100% sold on the new GFS view on this because it's the in-between run has been doing some squirrely things lately. But the fact that there is some kind of trough here into the eastern part of the United States for next weekend would allow for maybe a fairly significant push of cooler, drier air to come in. Something that lasts more than a day or so, let's put it that way. And then over the longer haul, you got another trough that tries to drop into the lakes as a ridge builds off the southeast coast, kind of a flat east-west ridge. So you do have westerly winds in the upper atmosphere moving things along. It'll be very warm, but it won't necessarily be hot, and it certainly won't be extreme. The soil moisture is so high now in parts of the Northeast that I really think that it's had an impact on afternoon high temperatures the last few days. Yes, we've been going above 90, but we haven't been really seeing extreme numbers as far as the heat is concerned. It's really been the humidity that has been so utterly problematic and remains so. Now, let's take a look at what this all means from the standpoint of day-to-day precip. One of the things I want to point out very strongly is with respect to the short-range models and the thunderstorms that are going on tonight. I'm just going to show you the HRRR's look. This is what the HRRR is showing. It's supposed to have the radar in about 20 minutes. This is what is supposed to be on it. And when we look at the national radar here, it's kind of obvious to me that they don't really match up very well. I'm going to just freshen this up to get the latest picture, but let me just refresh that again. This is the latest picture here. I mean, the radar is so much busier than what the HRRR is showing. Here's the radar. Here's the HRRR. It was the same thing last night. The NAM is no better, by the way. Each of these short-range models, maybe the NAM is a bit better. The NAM 12 seems to be a bit better with what it sees versus what is actually on the radar. If we carry this through tonight, you'll notice that some of these downpours, kind of survive, and then they just all fall apart once we move into the early morning hours as that cold front moves out. And I think that's how we're going to play this. And then the other question is, it looks like there is a little shower activity late on Friday that wants to gel up inland. And then we get this little blow up here on Saturday morning that moves out later in the day on Saturday with that low to the south. We're going to have, with that upper low cutting off where it is, we're going to have a bit of a high a weak high that's going to envelope around it across the Great Lakes and up into New England, with lower pressures to the south. So this is going to create a bit of an onshore flow, set up a warm front maybe just to our south, not the strongest of warm fronts by any means, but it does open up the door for downpour possibilities on Saturday, and then again on later Sunday into Sunday night, and then also later on Monday and on Tuesday, until that whole trough moves out. you're gonna have the threat for some downpours. Again, not raining all the time, but enough of the time where could put down some substantial amounts in some places. And then late next week, as that stronger shortwave drops into southeastern Canada, this is where we could have a more significant cold front coming through late next week, and a nice high with a decent shot of lowering of humidities. In fact, someone asked me the other day with regards to showing the dew point maps. Now look at what the GFS does. This is for next weekend, by the way. I'll back it up. We'll look at it from the standpoint of the dew points. The next couple of days, the dew points edge down a little bit tomorrow and a little bit on, they're still there on Friday, but they actually inch up Friday afternoon. They drop more Friday night across upstate New York and New England, and then they come back up next week. They don't quite get into the 70s again, but they do make it up into the upper 60s. And as we move through the latter part of next week, when we get this next cold front, if the models are correct, that's a nice shot of dry air. We're talking about dew points dropping down into the 40s, and that holds right from Sunday, August 19th, up until about Tuesday, August 21st. So it'll be 3 days of decent dew points, and of course, if the ridge builds back in the east, after that, you're going to wind up taking dew points back up into the 70s for a day or so. We'll kind of leave this in the long range in its usual squirrely manner of trying to go all over the place. It's futile to really speculate too much, but the model's been showing this idea for next weekend for a really decent push of dry air coming down from the north. So I'm gaining a little confidence from that. The European is not that much different from its view with regards to the upper air. There's the European. Actually, the European at 240 hours is a much deeper trough that is swinging down out of Canada. So the European hopefully is the model that is leading at the moment. I haven't really been paying too close attention to it, but the GFS goes back to what it had, something like this yesterday. It may go back to it. The European has it today. This would certainly support the notion of a good shot of dry air coming in for next weekend. So I'm going to come back on the board now with you guys. And by the way, before you ask, I don't really see anything in the Atlantic tropics unless we get another one of these homegrown things. I certainly don't see anything out through the next week. And, I could even speculate that it's probably going to be like that for the next 10 days. So the Atlantic remains quiet. The Pacific remains very active. I didn't show Hurricane John is going to stay offshore. Christie is in between. Probably will get wind up absorbed, either pulled up by John, or perhaps it runs out to the west, which is what the European does, and then weakens it to a depression and takes it just north of Hawaii. And of course we have Hector. But the Pacific also looks to be busy in the long term. So that is usually not the kind of thing that would be supportive for tropical storm development on the Atlantic side. Also, by the way, I know I'll kind of maybe shift trains of thought earlier, but with respect to the subtropical storm development, as Anthony Orr pointed out to me this morning, this is the third system this year, with Debbie having been subtropical at some point in its life cycle. 5 is the maximum we've seen in one season, and that was back in 1969. So let's run to the board here, and a big hello to everybody. San Bernardino County, as we Abios. I brought the maps up for that reason, because I did see I saw your comment before we started. Keith James, no big storms in northern New Jersey today, at least not yet. There's still time for these things to fire up, by the way, and there's still enough on the radar to the west that I'm not trusting models, the short range models here. Yesterday they were just god awful with respect to how they handled these thunderstorms into the east. Yes, Timothy Veltman, robust lightning to say the least. It was quite a lightning show for a lot of the area. Johnny Quest, you got your buckets ready, I hope, as you're in line for more downpours. Hate to put it that way, but it is true. Weather and low, you really are not going to have too much of a break into the humidity until maybe next weekend. That may be where your break is. So until then, you're going to run the risk of downpours and thunderstorms pretty much every day. David Fuller, his school got flooded yesterday. There was a lot of spots that had flash flooding from these thunderstorms. Parts of Long Island got the flash flooding. Southern Nassau, southwestern Suffolk County getting hit particularly hard with 2 to 3 inches of rain. Also, northern Monmouth County and Middlesex County, more toward Middlesex than Monmouth, really. Last night, we had a flash flood warning that went up at 9 o'clock, so it was kind of late there. Calm and quiet in Oceanside. Yeah, looks like Long Island had its thunderstorm romp last night, and let's see if the boilerplate comes back on, or is this a sign of a change in the long term? For those of you who aren't familiar, Long Island, which sits east of New York City, and in fact many areas in and around New York City have been experiencing a bit of a thunderstorm drought in the last 5 years. Not that there haven't been any thunderstorms, there have been, but they seem to be fewer than normal, and also especially for coastal areas. One of my friends, and I've had him on here, Bill Goodman, who works for the National Weather Service, we talked about this, and he expressed that there was some research showing that there's this kind of broad 5-year thunderstorm cycle that's at play in my neck of the woods, and that we may be coming off that bottom now and on the rise. So perhaps yesterday was a sign that thunderstorm activity in general will be increasing over the next several years in my particular neck of the woods. Because I can tell you, going back if you go back to the early 2000s and then before that, I can remember stretches out here where the thunderstorm activity was just out of control. And now for some areas there's been a bit of a dip in that, but the activity has definitely picked up this spring, and particularly this spring and summer, particularly in inland areas. The coast is still playing catch up. Why was there no severe thunderstorm warning last night in Nassau County? Iron Mine, one of the questions that came up, that there was no severe thunderstorm watch. Even though the Storm Prediction Center did have us at risk, there was no severe thunderstorm watch. And I wonder sometimes, because this happens from time to time, the risk is there. I don't exactly know what the criteria is when it comes to actually putting up a widespread severe thunderstorm watch over a geographic area of several hundred miles. I don't know what goes into that, because you would think that last night would have been a night where you might have seen a severe thunderstorm watch, and yet there wasn't. On the other hand, the amount of severe thunderstorm activity last night was exceptional. Now, I honestly don't know why there wasn't a warning, but there was a flash flood warning. I did see that. Perhaps, according to what was indicated on the Doppler radar, that it fell short of criteria from respect to wind. I'll have to address that to one of the folks at the Weather Service there. And I'm not coming at this, by the way, at all in a critical angle, because this does happen, and I would like to understand where the reasoning behind why in this particular instance there wasn't a severe thunderstorm warning, and at the same time you did have the flash flood warning. So, and then we did have the risk for severe, yet there was no severe thunderstorm watch box that was issued. So that's something I'll try and bring on Bill Goodman from the Weather Service on a Skype and ask him that question. I'm sure he'll be able to at least address the reasoning behind it. Wayne S., the flash flood was a late warning. It could very well be. Again, a lot of times with this, I can tell you from my own experience, when it comes to severe weather especially, and if you're covering a number of counties, it is very hard to stay ahead of it, okay? You try your best to stay ahead of it, but it's not an easy thing to do. Look, it was no surprise. I don't think it was any surprise to anyone that there was the threat for strong to severe thunderstorms last night. It was certainly advertised in forecasts that I saw, and with what we spoke about here, for example, over the last several days. And, you know, now we're going to kind of get into the minutia of it. So, you know what? Let's leave that to Mr. Goodman when he comes on. Maybe we can ask him those questions and see and come to a better understanding of how this process works. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else I needed to tell you guys tonight, and I think the answer is no. So we've pretty well covered it. I see Robert Hurley is on. Those storms in Brooklyn, will they survive into Nassau? Let me just take a look at the radar right now. Just make sure that there's no warnings out anywhere. Why don't I bring up the radar for you, Robert? And again, everybody, it is 7:52. So if you're watching this on a replay, again, this is dated. If it would be wise to check your local National Weather Service office at weather.gov and click on the latest radars and see if there are any warnings up. There were no warnings up at the moment, and when we loop it, looks like that cell is falling apart as it straddles the south shore of Brooklyn. So it doesn't look like there's much going on there. A couple of big cells in southwest Jersey between Trenton and Philadelphia. Looks like they're getting some fairly strong thunderstorms at the moment. And we'll go down to the Fort Dix radar and take a look there. And here's on the zoom. Make sure you guys can see it like I can. You can see the cells in and around Philadelphia and Trenton and right along 195, and then one cell is kind of broken off and heading into Monmouth County. And let's go down to Dover. Here's the wide view. There's just a lot, there's less activity tonight than what we saw last night. The pop-ups are there, but yesterday we had a broken line of thunderstorms that developed, and we're not seeing that today. So perhaps once we get past sunset, we'll probably see the remainder of these cells just weaken and fall apart. Which after how busy it was around here last night, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Okay, so we'll leave it here. The Joe and Joe weather show tonight, figure around 9 o'clock. It could be as early as 8:45, could be as late as 9:15. The severe weather last night actually pushed it back to 9:30, but we try to shoot for that 9:15 start time on most nights. And that's on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or on Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. Website posts are up too. You can check those out at meteorologistjoecioffi.com. And of course, you can go Facebooking at my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. And also check out my buddy Angry Ben. He handles my NYC Weather Now website. And you can check him out on Facebook, Angry Ben's Angry Weather. He has a lot of fun with it, and he has his character. That's who he is, and he's a great guy. I think you'd enjoy it. You can check out his website and also his Facebook page, Angry Ben's Angry Weather. One of the things I'm going to be doing, by the way, is when I started this earlier, I showed you that the website. The satellite website, I'm going to put together a video over the next few days just devoted to different weather websites that you might be interested in, or you might want to bookmark, and because they are handy. And if you're a weather enthusiast, if you haven't been using these websites, you probably should take a look. And also to benefit you when weather occurs and you need to know information. It's all fine and dandy to Google it, but you want to make sure you go to a good site, a reputable site, a good weather service website, and this will be an easy way for you to take a look at some of the websites that are out there that you might not necessarily stumble upon on a standard Google search or Yahoo search or whatever search you use. I'm going to do that, and maybe some point over the weekend, if I've got some time, we'll get it done. All right, so we'll leave it at that, folks. Thanks very much again for being here. Amazon link on here, Ebates link on here. I'm a member of the affiliate programs of both Amazon and Ebates. They're designed to provide a means for this channel to earn fees by linking to Amazon and Ebates, so you can get your stuff. Ebates will throw you some cash back as well, and those two sites throw me back a little bit of coin so I can get some cigars and maybe some coffee every once in a while. I thank those of you who have used those links. I really, really appreciate it. And remember, because come Christmas time, you can do your Christmas shopping on those links. Thanks very much for being here, folks. We'll see you tomorrow.